The storm had rolled in like a beast on the hunt, swallowing the night in black clouds and rage. Rain slammed against the windows, thick and violent, while thunder cracked overhead, rattling the frame of the quiet suburban home. Then came the scream, high-pitched, piercing. It cut through the thunder like a knife through silk. In the master bedroom, Laura bolted upright in bed. Her breath caught in her throat, and her pulse quickened as she recognized a voice, her daughter's. "Emily!" she gasped, flinging back the covers. She darted into the hallway, bare feet thudding softly on the hardwood floor. The hallway was dim, lit only by the flickering lightning outside. Her daughter stood at the threshold of her bedroom, frozen in place. 7-year-old Emily was trembling, clutching the doorframe. Her pale nightgown clung to her in damp patches from sweat or tears, or both. "Emily, what is it?" Laura cried, rushing forward. The child didn't answer. She simply pointed. That's when Laura saw it. Lying just outside Emily's bedroom door was an old porcelain doll. Its dress torn and soiled, the once white lace stained with what looked like old rust or dried blood. One side of the doll's porcelain face was cracked down the cheek, jagged like a lightning bolt, and its single remaining glass eye gleamed in the flashes of lightning. The other socket was hollow, black, and disturbingly deep. Its tiny hands were tinted with a deep reddish brown, as if it clawed its way through something it shouldn't have. But what truly chilled Laura's blood was a stitch symbol on the doll's chest, an uneven hand-sewn circle with a crude X running through it. The thread used was thick, dry, and unmistakably dark red. Laura's breath hitched. She knew that symbol. She hadn't seen it in decades, not since she was a teenager. Her father had once told her stories of a case, one so horrific he never spoke of it again. A murder, a child, a doll, and that symbol. At the time, she'd assumed it was just one of his vivid cautionary tales, shaped by years on the force and the mental scars that came with it. But now here it was. A chill crawled down her spine as footsteps creaked behind her. From the guest room emerged John Mercer, her father, early 70s retired detective, and a man who rarely showed emotion. He rubbed his tired eyes, adjusting to the dim hallway, but the moment his gaze fell on the doll, he froze. His face turned ashen. His knees buckled slightly. "No," he muttered. "That's not possible." He stepped forward, breath shallow, eyes locked on the porcelain figure like it might rise up and attack. Laura turned to him, her voice shaking. "Dad, what is this? Is this the one? From—" "I burned it," John whispered, his voice hollow. "I watched it burn. 33 years ago. Evidence locker fire. Case closed. Nothing left." He knelt slowly beside the doll, his fingers trembling as they hovered over its chipped face. It was exactly the same, every detail, every imperfection. The crack, the missing eye, even the stitching on its chest. It hadn't just returned. It had never left. Behind him, Emily stepped closer and reached for his hand, her small fingers wrapped around his trembling ones. "Grandpa," she said softly, voice barely a whisper over the rain. "She said you'd come back." John's heart stopped. He turned to her. "Who?" he asked, voice cracking. Emily stared ahead, unblinking. "The girl in my dreams," she replied. "The one with no face. She said it was your turn now." A loud thunderclap roared through the sky, but none of them moved. The doll remained still on the floor, and yet, for the first time in decades, John Mercer felt like the case wasn't over. It had only just begun. 35 years ago, Detective John Mercer was a different man, sharp, driven, and utterly consumed by justice. He didn't just chase leads. He hunted them, gnawed at them, refused to let go until the truth bled through. And back then, the truth was elusive, hidden beneath layers of horror in a case that would come to find and eventually destroy his entire career. They called them the threaded murders. 6 families, 6 separate counties, all killed within an 8-month span. The patterns were undeniable. The adults were found gagged and bound with coarse thread, their eyes often sewn shut with the same macabre stitching. But it was the children who bore the worst of it. Each found lifeless, their bodies contorted in grotesque poses, as though staged for some twisted display. And always, without exception, a doll was found near the child's body. Each doll was unique. Some porcelain, some cloth, others made of old leather or straw. But they all shared a singular, terrifying feature, a hand-stitched symbol carved crudely into their chest. An uneven circle, an X slicing through its center, sewn with deep red thread that had long dried and darkened like blood. It was as if the killer was signing his name with every display. The media erupted. Headlines dubbed the unknown killer the Thread Man. Wild theories surged, satanic cults, rogue taxidermists, even supernatural speculation. But behind closed doors, Mercer knew one thing. It wasn't a group. It was a single hand behind the needle, a mind steeped in ritual and rage. And he was getting closer. But obsession has a cost. Mercer missed his daughter's piano recital, then her birthday, then her graduation. His marriage crumbled under the weight of unanswered phone calls and sleepless nights. His face aged 10 years and one. At the precinct, officers stopped inviting him out for drinks. His desk became a war zone of files, dolls, string maps, and autopsy photos. And then came case number 34. Maggie Sanders, 5 years old, taken from her home in broad daylight. No signs of forced entry. Her parents were found hours later in their living room, wrists bound with rough hemp, mouth sewn shut. No defensive wounds. No struggle. Just silence and precision. Surgical horror. Maggie's body was never found, but the doll was. It sat on the child's bed, crimson thread oozing from its stitched mouth in a sick mimicry of a smile. Its glass eyes gleamed with malicious innocence. John didn't sleep for 3 days, and then he caught a break. A tip led him to Curtis Vale, a transit man with severe paranoid delusions. He'd been seen in the neighborhood days prior. When they brought him in, he muttered gibberish about threads that whisper and eyes that bleed lies. Worse, in his worn duffel bag was a doll, cracked, dust-covered, and bearing a crude stitched circle across its chest. Mercer knew he had his man, but the evidence didn't agree. There were no fingerprints, no DNA, no timeline that held up. Curtis was unstable, yes, but never violent. Still Mercer, blinded by desperation, pushed hard, too hard. He coerced a shaky confession after hours of aggressive interrogation. Internal Affairs launched an inquiry. The case collapsed in court. Curtis Vale was released and vanished weeks later. Some said he jumped into a river. Others claimed he was seen muttering to himself outside a children's hospital in Ohio. He was never found. Mercer was disgraced, forced into early retirement. No medal, no parade, just a signed letter and sealed files. And the doll, evidence piece number 45, was incinerated in a controlled burn, supervised by Mercer himself. He watched it disintegrate in the furnace. He watched the porcelain crack, the thread shrivel. He watched it die, or so he thought. Now, decades later, the same stitch symbol lay at his granddaughter's bedroom door. The same cracked face, the same blood-dark hands. The past hadn't stayed buried. It had clawed its way back, needle in hand. It sat there, still, unmoving, drenched in the flickering hallway light, its single glass eye glinting like it knew. John hadn't slept, not even a moment. He sat at the kitchen table until sunrise, staring at the doll now locked inside a sealed evidence box he had begged his daughter to let him keep. Lisa didn't understand. She was furious, trembling with fear and maternal rage. "You said it was gone," she snapped, arms crossed, pacing. "You said you burned it, Dad." "I did," John muttered, still staring at the box. "I watched it turn to ash." "Then how is it here?" "Huh?" she demanded. "You think someone dug through 30-year-old case files, found the exact same doll, recreated the exact same stitching just to traumatize my daughter? No one could replicate that stitch pattern by chance," he said, quieter this time. "Not unless they saw the originals." Lisa shook her head. "This isn't just your case anymore, Dad. Emily is scared. I'm scared. And you look like you've already buried yourself in it again." He didn't respond. Instead, he left the next morning, heading back to his apartment on the outskirts of town. The clouds hung low as if the sky itself was waiting for something to fall. He pulled into his driveway, the engine still humming as unease crawled up his spine. The door was open, not kicked in, not forced. Just ajar, like someone wanted him to know they'd been there. Inside, the place had been ransacked. Not the chaotic mess of a junkie or a desperate thief. This was surgical, controlled. The drawers in his filing cabinet were removed and carefully stacked. Cabinets left wide open. Even the blinds were tilted in the same direction, and on the coffee table, a single spot sat empty, dustless, a clean rectangle the exact size of the manila file that had never left his possession in over 30 years. His personal dossier on the threaded murders. No one knew he had it, not even Lisa. He had kept it sealed beneath floorboards, wrapped in a thick, moisture-proof sleeve. Victim profiles, photos, scribbled theories, and Maggie Sanders' doll photo, the one that still haunted his sleep. All gone. Before the weight of it could settle in, he heard a rustle behind the door. He turned. No one. But on the floor, half tucked under the frame, was a plain white envelope. He picked it up. No name. No address. No postage. Inside, a single sheet of paper, folded neatly. You missed her. He froze. A small photo fell out, and it was a young girl, maybe 6 or 7. Pale. Her eyes were closed. But John couldn't tell if it was from sleep or death. She was bound to a chair, wrists tied with the same coarse thread he knew too well. Her hair was matted, and in her lap sat a doll. Different face. Same stitch. What made his stomach twist wasn't just a doll, but the girl's forehead. The symbol, the uneven circle with a cross, had been stitched into her flesh. Blood crusted around the crude lines like an open wound trying to heal. The back of the photo bore a timestamp. 8 days ago, he called Clara Daniels, a retired tech analyst from his cold case division. She still owed him a few favors. Scan this, he said after sending the photo. I need metadata, location data, anything. 2 hours later, Clara called back. John, the data points to a rural town called Wellington. Population under 3,000. No murders reported there in 20 years. But that photo, yeah, it's real. And recent. John didn't hesitate. He packed a bag. He wasn't looking for justice. Not anymore. He didn't want to play hero. He told himself he just wanted confirmation that this was some elaborate prank or cruel imitation. That maybe he was losing his mind. But when he crossed into Wellington, something shifted. The trees leaned closer. The sky hung lower. And the moment he stepped out of the car, the scent hit him. Damp rot. And when it came a whisper he thought he'd buried long ago. Wellington was the kind of town that looked like a painting, too clean, too still. But beneath its postcard charm, John felt something stale. Something rotten beneath the surface. The streets were lined with flower boxes, and the townspeople offered polite nods, but their eyes avoided his. No one wanted to talk. He started at the diner. The coffee was lukewarm, the smiles thinner. "You're not from around here," said the waitress, a woman in her 60s with tight lips and a gaze that lingered too long. "No," he replied, "just passing through, investigating something." When he pulled out the photo, the one with the girl, the stitched forehead, the doll, her hand trembled slightly as she refilled his cup. Then she turned without a word and disappeared into the kitchen. At a nearby coffee shop, he tried again. He didn't show the photo this time, just the symbol. The young barista stared for a moment. Then, without a word, he shut off the register, turned the open sign to close, and walked out the door. That's when John called Clara, back at her secure station. She dug deeper into Wellington's public records. Nothing turned up on the photos girl. No missing children reports. No hospital activity. No school absences. It was as if she didn't exist. But Clara wasn't done. She scanned through archived microfiche and buried newspaper reels. Hours passed before she pinged him back. "Found something," she said. "It's from 1988. A fire at a place called Threadwell House. Foster care facility. Everyone dead. No official cause listed. No investigation. Not even a coroner's report." John froze. The name punched the air out of his lungs. Threadwell. It had to be a coincidence, but his gut screamed otherwise. In one of the original threaded murder dolls, the 5th victim's doll, he remembered something unusual. a tiny paper tag, so old and faded he had nearly missed it. It read, "For Emmett Threadwell." Back then, Threadwell didn't ring any bells. Now, it rang like a siren. He wasn't chasing a random serial killer. He was unraveling a cover-up. He cross-referenced victims' families. Maggie Sanders. Her mother once worked as a caretaker at a children's home, though the name was never listed. 2 other parents in different counties had been registered foster parents during the late 80s. It wasn't random. It was targeted. Someone was erasing the children who came out of Threadwell House. John drove to the site that afternoon. The land was mostly overgrown. What remained of the building was a husk, burnt support beams and collapsed walls. Nature had reclaimed most of it, but the foundation remained. He found a hatch in the cellar floor, rusted but intact. It opened with a groan. The air beneath was stale, choked with soot and mildew. He descended with a flashlight. The concrete basement was blackened, but something glinted off the beam. Iron rings, bolted to the floor in a precise semicircle, child-sized, restraints. Along the walls were dolls, hung from nails. Their cracked faces turned toward him as if still watching. Their eyes, glass and hollow, reflected the beam of his light. And then he saw one with something embedded in its chest. A recorder. He pressed a button. The cassette word. Then a voice, high-pitched and eerie, emerged. "You made me, John. You burned me. But dolls remember." His hands trembled. He staggered back, heart pounding in his ears. Upstairs, Clara called through his earpiece. "I got something. Registry files from Threadwell. There's one entry sealed by court order. That's standard for privacy, right?" John replied, swallowing his fear. "Not this time," she said. "This wasn't sealed for privacy. It was sealed for national security." John froze. "Name." A pause. "Eliza Vale, born 1981. His blood ran cold. Vale. Curtis Vale's sister. He never knew Curtis had a sibling. No one did. She wasn't in any prior investigation. No family records, no mentions, nothing. She had been wiped clean. Hidden. Protected. Which begged the question, by who? And more terrifyingly, why? The drive back from Wellington was a blur. John's thoughts spiraled. Fragmented pieces of memory, burnt case notes, stitched dolls, and now a name that hadn't existed in any official record. Eliza Vale. His gut told him this wasn't over. Not even close. When he stepped through the front door of his daughter's house, Lisa was waiting. She had that same hardened expression she wore when she was 13, after the divorce, after the long silences, after he failed her more than once. But beneath that was something else now. Fear and confusion. John sat down at the kitchen table. "I need to ask you something," he said, voice steady but low. "And I need you to answer honestly, no matter how strange it sounds." Lisa nodded slowly. "Do you remember a place called Threadwell?" Her body stiffened. Her jaw clenched. And in that brief moment, everything shifted. She began, then stopped. Her hands trembled. "Lisa," John urged. "You were there, weren't you?" Her eyes welled up. "I didn't think it was real," she whispered. "I thought it was just a dream. I never told you. I didn't even know until a few years ago." He leaned in. "What do you remember?" "I remember a room. With green walls. No windows. We weren't allowed to speak. If we cried, we were punished. They played lullabies through the vents. Over and over. There was a woman. I never saw her face. Just her voice. Sweet and calm, but always humming that song. She rubbed her arms as if the memory physically chilled her. And the dolls?" John asked. Lisa hesitated. They had no eyes. Just hollow holes. We had to sit in circles with them. Hold them. Sleep beside them. And if we let go, they said the walls would whisper our secrets to her. John felt his heart sink. It was real. All of it. Threadwell hadn't just been a failed foster home. It had been a lab, a place where children were conditioned, twisted, into silence and obedience using symbols, fear, and stories that blurred into nightmares. And Lisa, his Lisa, had been part of it. "I was only there for 2 months, she said. Then you fought for custody and got me back. You saved me, Dad. You just never knew from what. He sat back, mind reeling. All these years, he'd been chasing a killer, but he hadn't realized. The killer had been chasing the past, wiping it clean. Every victim, every child, every parent, all connected to Threadwell. And now it was Emily. She's targeting Emily, he muttered. Lisa's head shot up. Why? Because she's the last thread, he said, voice hoarse. You were in Threadwell. Emily is your daughter, and that makes her the final subject. Lisa stared at him, horrified. Eliza Vale, he continued, was never just Curtis's sister. She was the architect of Threadwell. Curtis was just the fall guy, the perfect distraction, unstable, convenient, disposable. He stood, pacing now, the pieces falling together like a sick puzzle. Eliza didn't burn in that fire. She survived, went underground, and when she saw the program collapsing, she started erasing it, one by one. Families, children, records, anyone who could trace back what Threadwell really was. And the dolls, they weren't messages. John said they were trophies, proof that the system worked, that the programming stuck, that she could control memory, identity, even fear. And now, he looked toward the hallway, toward Emily's room. She wants to complete her circle. Lisa covered her mouth. Oh my God! She isn't killing for revenge, he said. She's continuing her work. The dolls, the symbols, the silence. Emily had already started to dream. It was happening again. And this time, John knew. If he didn't stop Eliza Vale, he wouldn't just lose his granddaughter. He'd lose her mind. The old church stood like a corpse on the edge of Wellington. Its steeple broken, its stained glass windows long shattered. Moss clung to the stone like rot. The storm clouds above didn't rumble. They loomed, waiting, as if the building itself were holding its breath. John stepped out of the car, flashlight in one hand, gun holstered tight in the other. Clara followed close behind, jaw clenched, laptop bag strapped across her chest. They had traced Eliza Vale here through encrypted signal tracking and proximity surveillance. Her last digital footprint pointed to this forgotten chapel. They entered through the back. The doors groaned open like a warning. Inside, the air was thick, too still for comfort. It smelled of dust, wax, and something faintly metallic. The main aisle stretched forward in eerie silence, leading to the altar, dimly lit by flickering candles. And there she was, Emily, tied to a wooden chair, her limbs gently bound with red thread. Her small chest rose and fell. She was asleep but breathing, suspended in that fragile place between dreams and control. Around her, seated in every pew like a congregation from hell, were dozens of dolls, each one carefully stitched into place. Some had no eyes. Some had mouths sewn shut. All of them bore the red thread. Above Emily, a speaker whispered a haunting lullaby, soft, warbling, looping. The same song from Lisa's childhood. The same lullaby that threaded through Threadwell's halls all those years ago. And then, from the shadows behind the altar, she emerged. Eliza Vale. Her hair was silver now, knotted and wild, but her face was composed, serene. Her eyes, though, were something else entirely, empty like glass left in a fire. You came, she said. Her voice echoed with calm madness. The prodigal father, the silent witness, the man who looked away. John raised his gun, hand steady. Eliza smiled. You're not here for justice, John. You're here for redemption. But you can't have it. She stepped forward. Because you were part of it. You sent Lisa back. You didn't check. You signed the paper, closed the file, and walked away. John's grip tightened. Emily stirred in the chair, her eyelids fluttering. Eliza turned toward her. She's the perfect subject. Pure, untouched by guilt, ready to inherit the silence. No, John said. He didn't fire at Eliza. He fired at the speaker above the altar. The lullaby shattered mid-note. Silence. Emily stirred more violently, and then, with a sudden gasp, her eyes snapped open. Grandpa! Eliza turned, her face twisting. She lunged, But Clara burst through the side aisle, tackling her mid-charge. The two women hit the ground, thrashing. Eliza clawed at Clara's face, muttering incoherent syllables, but Clara reached into her bag and plunged a syringe into her neck. A sedative. Eliza's body seized and slackened. She whispered, eyes rolling back. Thread the silence. So the soul. John rushed to Emily, untying her trembling hands, holding her close. She was dazed, but awake. Ho! The distant wail of sirens echoed through the night. By the time the police arrived, Eliza was unconscious. Medics stabilized her. Emily was taken to safety. Clara sat on the church steps, breathing hard, her hands still shaking. But the horror wasn't over. In the basement below the altar, the responding officers made a discovery far worse than anyone expected. Not dolls. Files. Hundreds, no, thousands, of seal case files locked in steel cabinets lining the walls. Each one labeled. Names, ages, photos, notes, symbols, coordinates. John flipped through them, his throat tightening. These weren't keepsakes. They were records. Threadwell hadn't been just a single foster home. It had been the face of something bigger. A program. One designed to fracture identity, suppress emotion, rewrite memory. And it hadn't stopped in 1988. It had evolved. Somewhere out there, more churches like this could exist. More children. More silence. John stood in the flickering light. Emily clutched in his arms as realization dawned. He hadn't closed the case. He'd only opened the first file. Emily recovered. She remembered little, just the lullabies. Lisa began therapy. Clara shared the files with federal investigators. John visited the graves of the original victims, laid down a new doll, clean, unstitched, just still. He looked into the camera lens. I closed the case decades ago. But justice doesn't wait. And sometimes the thing we burn forget is what survives the longest. He walked away. A voiceover fades in. If a doll could hold memories, would it cry for the children it watched die? Would it scream for those who forgot them? Or would it wait for the next door to open? What would you do if your past came back stitched in silence? Comment below, because justice isn't buried. It's just waiting to be unboxed.